In China, 2 people vanish every single minute. Do the math and it lands like a punch. Roughly 3,000 disappearances a day, and more than 1 million people a year. A human drain so large that, in any other country, it would dominate every headline, every parliamentary session, every national emergency broadcast. But China is not any other country. What makes the numbers feel even more unreal is the machinery that surrounds them. China has built one of the most extensive surveillance networks on Earth. Hundreds of millions of cameras, woven into street corners, apartment lobbies, train stations, highway ramps, and school gates. In theory, a society watched so closely should be a society where missing people are found quickly, where the last known location is retrieved in minutes, where a disappearance triggers alarms and coordinated searches. Yet the grim pattern persists. People vanish and then silence. No official accounting that satisfies the public. No consistent follow-up. No transparent closure. Families search, post, beg, and then learn to speak in codes or stop speaking entirely. And as this quiet crisis continues, another chilling phenomenon spreads alongside it. People selling their homes like they're fleeing a fire that no one else can see. Across city after city, families dump properties at steep losses. In some areas, apartments that once symbolized stability are now treated like liabilities. Anchors that must be cut loose before the ship sinks. Then come the discoveries that feel like fragments of a horror story. Scattered across the landscape. Abandoned ID cards, piles of them. Found in forests, landfills, riverbanks, and even caves. Not 1 or 2, not 10. Sometimes bags, sometimes stacks, sometimes burned, warped, and half-melted. An ID card in China is not just a card. It's access to life. It is how you buy a train ticket, check into a hotel, register for medical care, interact with authorities, prove you exist. People don't casually throw that away. So the questions that follow are inevitable and dangerous. What are these people so afraid of? What is really happening inside this country? Beijing's housing panic. If you want to understand the mood, don't start with speeches. Start with the street. In Beijing, a disturbing shift has been noticed by residents and online observers. For sale signs multiplying overnight, like a sudden bloom of warning flags. Bloggers describe walking through neighborhoods where listings seem to appear in waves. Conversations between friends and relatives have changed too, subtly but unmistakably. It used to be, "Have you bought a place yet? Where did you buy? How much did it cost?" Now it's, "Did you sell? How fast did it move? How low did you have to go?" It's the difference between a society building a future and a society trying to liquidate one. Listings in Beijing have been described as enormous, hundreds of thousands of homes on the market, with new listings appearing daily. And what's most revealing is not the volume alone, but the desperation behind it. Price cuts come in rounds. Owners lower again, and still the phone doesn't ring. The inventory piles up like unsold goods in a warehouse, except these goods are the life savings of ordinary families. A woman's testimony, echoed in countless similar voices. Even if you keep dropping the price, it still won't sell. And a few years ago, this would have been unthinkable. In some accounts, a home bought for 2 million yuan, once treated as a guaranteed ticket upward, can now be valued closer to 1.5 million or less. Renovations that cost hundreds of thousands disappear into the void. People talk about paying for marble floors, custom cabinets, imported fixtures, then selling at a loss so severe it feels like the market is erasing years of labor with a single stroke. There are stories of apartments that can be moved into with a down payment that would have sounded absurd during the boom. Tens of thousands of yuan in some cases. What used to require a lifetime of accumulation now looks like a clearance sale. And when a society that once believed property equals safety suddenly starts treating property as a trap, you have to ask why. Because people don't sell homes in panic for no reason. Abandoned identities, missing people. The housing story is frightening. But it becomes something else entirely when you place it beside the other trail, the trail of discarded identities. Across different provinces, People have reported finding ID cards thrown away in places that make no sense. Roadside trash heaps, bags in rivers, scattered piles on hiking paths, tucked into crevices like someone wanted them hidden rather than simply discarded. In some reports, the IDs are mixed with bank cards, medical insurance cards, household registration booklets, even drivers' licenses, an entire life bundle, as if someone's existence was stripped down to documents and then dumped like garbage. One account describes an ID belonging to a girl born in 2009 found near a cave entrance by a reservoir in Guizhou. Another describes a fisherman in Hubei reeling in a plastic bag full of IDs. He hands them to police. And then, nothing. No public update. No explanation. No closure. In early 2023, Chinese outlet Jupai News reported a man discovering a pile of documents by the roadside: ID cards, medical insurance cards, bank cards, household booklets, driver's licenses. Police collected the items and said they were investigating, but they reportedly could not identify who dumped them, or at least did not publicly say so. Now, one abandoned ID might be a lost wallet. 10 might be a weird accident. But when people across the country keep encountering the same pattern, it stops feeling like coincidence. Starts feeling like a signal. And in China, signals are dangerous because what they imply is worse than what anyone can say out loud. People whisper about trafficking, about coercion, about forced labor, about deaths that never get recorded properly, about people disappearing into systems that don't produce receipts. There is also another category, one that is widely debated, fiercely denied by Chinese authorities, and cited by critics and human rights advocates for years: the allegation of forced organ harvesting. It's an accusation surrounded by propaganda battles and geopolitical tension, and it is difficult for outsiders to verify in real time because the very nature of the claim implies secrecy, intimidation, and institutional cover. But even if one refuses to accept any single explanation, the emotional truth remains. The public fear is real. The fear doesn't need perfect proof to spread. It only needs patterns, silence, and the sense that the state has answers it refuses to share. In 2022, a video circulated featuring an explorer, Wang Xiangjuan, sometimes dubbed China's king of adventure, claiming to have found burned ID cards inside an ice cave, allegedly linked to missing young women. He also reportedly described a secret tunnel near the Tibet-Nepal border. Around these stories swirled rumors that ranged from unsettling to extreme, rumors that were not independently verified but refused to die online. Then came another detail that fueled the mythos. Wang Xiangjuan reportedly died suddenly in December 2020 during a climbing trip. That fact, true or not in every detail, became part of the narrative machine that thrives in information-starved environments. When people don't trust official explanations, everything becomes suspicious, and every death becomes a question mark. And when a society has too many question marks, it begins to feel like a country of shadows. The 150-year shock. So why did the fear spike so sharply? Why did it seem to tip into panic in certain circles? Many point to a moment that spread like wildfire online before it was deleted. The September 3, 2025 military parade in Beijing's Tiananmen Square, and a reported exchange between Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin. According to circulating accounts, Xi remarked that in the past few lived to 70, but today 70 is still young. Putin replied that biotechnology is advancing, suggesting organs could be transplanted repeatedly, making people younger, perhaps even approaching immortality. And then Xi reportedly added, in this century, humans could live to 150 years. On paper, it could be interpreted as a boast about medical progress. In another context, a leader might say something similar and it would spark curiosity, not terror. But China is not that context. To many listeners, especially those already steeped in rumors and distrust, the line landed like a coded confession. It didn't sound like optimism. It sounded like a threat. It sounded like the kind of statement you make when you believe the resources to extend life can be extracted from the powerless. And that is why the reaction was so explosive. The video was reportedly deleted quickly. Keywords were censored. But netizens, as they often do, found ways around restrictions, sharing it again in fragments and screenshots. 150 became a viral term. Some accounts claimed WeChat searches for 150 spiked by thousands of percent in a single day, numbers that are difficult to verify independently, but consistent with the kind of shockwave the story produced. One comment repeated in many forms: if he really lives to 150, that would be endless hell. In Guangzhou, a man who shared the clip in a WeChat group was reportedly detained and accused of spreading AI-generated rumors, facing a heavy prison sentence. The charge itself, AI rumor, was widely mocked as a modern label slapped onto an old reflex. Silence the messenger, redefine the message as fabrication, and punish anyone who amplifies it. A lawyer's bitter line captures why this hit so hard. He says humans can live to 150, but my client only got to live to 15. Even if the specific phrasing is impossible to confirm, the sentiment is easy to understand. In a country where families feel abandoned when tragedy strikes, a leader talking casually about extended lifespans can sound grotesque, like celebrating a banquet in front of a starving crowd. A nation that feels like it's emptying out. And then there is the strangest part of all. The sensation, not always measurable, not always provable, but widely described, that China is becoming empty. People post videos of once crowded streets now quiet. They film shopping districts with more staff than customers. They document restaurants with for rent signs, night markets that never fully wake up, highways that move too smoothly during hours that used to be gridlock. A blogger says, back when China had 1.2 to 1.3 billion people, everywhere was packed. Now they say 1.4 billion, and it feels like no one is around. Some argue this is just economic slowdown. People stay home, spend less, go out less. Others point to migration, workers returning to their hometowns. But then the counter-argument appears. The countryside feels empty too. From northeast villages to southern provinces, observers describe abandoned rural homes with furniture still inside, clothes still hanging, firewood stacked, kitchens intact. Like families left suddenly, without the usual rituals of moving. Normally, people sell, they rent, they strip the house, they take the valuables. They don't leave towels on lines like the day froze mid-motion. This fuels darker speculation, some grounded, some not. Urbanization alone can't explain every ghost village. Economic pressure can't explain every scattered ID card. And official statistics, when distrusted, don't calm people, they inflame them. China's official data has acknowledged population decline in recent years. But online discourse often insists the reality is worse. Some claim the population may be far below what is publicly stated. Others cite unusual mortality patterns, the surge of sudden deaths among younger demographics, and the long shadow of COVID. Here we need caution. Numbers circulating online are frequently inconsistent, politically weaponized, and difficult to verify. But what matters for understanding social psychology is not just the accuracy of every statistic, it's the collapse of confidence. When people stop trusting the baseline facts about their own society, they begin to treat reality as a rumor and rumors as reality. And that is how a country becomes vulnerable, not just economically but spiritually. The COVID shadow and the funeral flames. COVID is one of the most sensitive layers of this story. In many places around the world, the pandemic left scars. In China, it left a deep trauma wrapped in censorship. Doctors and citizens sometimes warn online of rising positivity rates. People complain of sore throats, lingering coughs, exhaustion. Symptoms that may reflect many illnesses, but which get folded into the ongoing fear that the country is still living with waves of infection. Then comes the ghost festival imagery. Streets lit by flames as families burn paper offerings. Some posts describe the flames looking like hell, and claim that the number of people burning offerings has surged dramatically compared to previous years. Is that proof of mass death? Not necessarily. Traditions fluctuate. Videos can mislead. But in a climate of distrust, Even a cultural ritual becomes interpreted as a census. People whisper, "Too many died," and then they whisper the next line. They're hiding it. Whether or not every whisper is true, the effect is the same. Fear compounds fear. What happens when a society stops believing? At the center of all this, missing people, abandoned IDs, housing panic, censorship, rumors, empty streets is something more fragile than the economy. It's belief. Authoritarian systems don't survive on force alone. They survive because most people, most days, decide it's safer to cooperate than to resist. They tell themselves, it's bad, but manageable. It's unfair, but not fatal. If I keep my head down, I can live. But when people start selling their homes like escape tickets, when they treat IDs like evidence to dispose of, when they interpret a leader's words as a threat rather than reassurance, something has shifted in the underlying psychology. A society that loses faith does not necessarily explode overnight. Sometimes it decays slowly, quietly, like metal corroding under paint. That corrosion looks like families withdrawing from public life, young people opting out of marriage and children, not as rebellion, but as refusal to feed a system they no longer trust. Citizens relying on rumors because official narratives feel like theater. Communities atomizing as people fear being punished not only for what they say, but for what they hear. Money fleeing into whatever form can be carried: cash, gold, foreign assets, anything that can cross borders more easily than a person can. And over time, even the strongest propaganda becomes less convincing, because propaganda requires one ingredient to work: a public willing to pretend. When people stop pretending, the gap between the official story and lived reality becomes unbearable. That's when a state begins to spend more on control, more on censorship, more on policing speech, and yet feels less secure than ever. Because fear can silence a population, but fear cannot rebuild trust. The final question: so what is really happening in China? If you demand a single tidy answer, you won't get one, not honestly. The truth is likely a tangled knot of causes: economic decline, housing collapse, social immobility, censorship, corruption, local-level abuses, trafficking risks, bureaucratic indifference, political paranoia, and the psychological trauma of living under a system that treats transparency as weakness. But the most important reality may be simpler than any conspiracy. People feel unsafe, not just from crime or illness, but from the system itself, because the system is the one thing they cannot question without risk. That is why abandoned ID cards feel like clues. That is why for sale signs feel like evacuation notices. That is why missing people feel like a national wound that no one is allowed to name. And in a country where everything is watched, the most terrifying thought is not that someone might see you. It's that someone already did, and decided you could disappear without consequence. So the question returns, quieter now, but sharper than ever. How do you protect yourself in a place where the rules can change without warning? And how can you ever truly be safe if the truth itself is treated as contraband?